Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you joined us. You can always find us goodlifetelevision.org. So many of you are finding us there from all over the world. So we welcome you. We're grateful that you're with us. You can follow us on the social media platforms where we have not only all the long form interviews of these great guests, but we also have what we call power clips. And so you can kind of catch some of the great moments from those interviews. This program is brought to you by the Turner Foundation. You can find them at theturnerfoundation.com. They are wonderful presenting sponsors of this program. I'm really excited about my guest today. Buddy Teaster is with me. Buddy is the president and CEO of Soles4Souls. Buddy, welcome.
Great. It's a pleasure to be here, Dean. Thank you.
Could you just start by giving us a little bit about kind of your upbringing, your background, kind of where you came from?
Sure. My parents were just in town this past weekend, so this was a topic of conversation in a way that surprised my daughters. So my father was a coal miner in West Virginia, and I am amazed at what he was able to accomplish in his life. He graduated from high school when he went to the Army. He didn't have indoor plumbing until then. And to think about where I am now and what I've been able to do, the first one on either side of my mother or father's family ever to go to college, and the opportunities I've had are kind of mind-blowing. And it was great to reconnect with that part of my history that my daughters find a little hard to believe still. And what that has led to is I went to college in Virginia, which opened up all kinds of doors for me. I worked in the theater for a while, got my MBA at SMU in Texas, lived there for a long time, never expected that. And then I've been at Soles4Souls since 2012. And Dean, I hope that you can say the same thing about what you're doing now, but I've never been happier. The work that I get to do and be a part of here is every day. I just am thankful for that.
That's fantastic. And you've got a family. You've been married, I think, almost 30 years, and two daurs.
Yes.
Where are you located now?
I'm in Nashville, Tennessee now. I've been here since 2012 when I started with Soles4Souls. I love it here. I wish I'd figured it out sooner. And I have one daughter who still lives here. She's 24, lives in Nashville, so we get to see her a lot. And then a daughter who's a freshman in college, who's going back to Texas. She's at TCU in Fort Worth. So I don't know that we'll get her back here or not.
Yeah, we spent 9.5 years in Dallas, Fort Worth. So pretty close to SMU. And yeah, that's a great neck of the woods.
Absolutely.
Just for somebody who's not familiar at all with Soles4Souls, I want you to give us a background on it. But it is the largest not-for-profit shoe and apparel social enterprise in the U.S. In addition to the free distribution of new footwear and apparel, Soles4Souls distributes shoes and clothes through its micro enterprise program to create sustainable jobs in developing countries. But talk about what you love about it and kind of some of the particulars on how this works.
Sure, Dean. It's a reason that when I came to Soles4Souls in 2012, it was in bad shape, right? The CEO he wasn't here anymore. He was also the founder. Very messy how that happened. The organization was in really terrible financial shape. The board was kind of falling apart, reputation. So there was lots of reasons not to take this job. What was super powerful and remains so for me is the model. So now we like to think about Soles4Souls creating opportunity. So that's an opportunity to have an income and take care of your family. It's an opportunity to have a chance to go to school or to work safely, to prevent disease. It's also an opportunity for people like us to volunteer and serve with things that are in our closets that we don't use anymore. It's an opportunity for companies to use their excess inventory in a more creative, impactful way. And it's an opportunity to keep things out of landfills, which is good for the planet, right? So we like to think about all those ways of creating opportunity. And we'd like to think about it in the short term and the long term. So the short term is there are people who need help right now, right? There are people in not too far from where you're sitting and where I'm sitting who don't have adequate shoes and clothes, right? So how do we help those people, whether that's just because they're in need or after a natural disaster? And we do that in the US and all around the world. But there's also this longer term story, which we call micro enterprise, of we find time after time in place after place, if you give people tools and get out of the way, they can accomplish almost everything that they need. But what is really challenging is that first opportunity. So what we found is that shoes and clothes can be an incredible engine to create growth and stability and predictability for especially women, so that they can take care of and invest in their families. And when we do that, the results can be fast, and dramatic. And so even though it's kind of an easy thing to overlook, shoes and clothes, most of us take them for granted. And yet when we get them in the right people's hands, magic can happen with that.
Wow. So what's give me an example of if you could off the top of your head of a micro enterprise and specifically something that happened where somebody started something that was sustainable that's been life-changing.
Sure. So I'll cheat a little bit. This picture behind me that you see right here with these three people, the woman on the far left in the black shirt and the black hat, her name is Marie-Ange, and we started working with her in Haiti in 2013. And Dean, when we met her, like, she was just on the edge, right? She had a 16-year-old daughter, who's the woman in the orange shirt there, who was about to have a baby. She was about to be evicted from where she was living, which was barely a house. And she sort of felt out of options. And we partnered with a local organization there. We still work with the Haitian American Caucus. And she had a job there. She was a cook. She heard about this program to sell shoes. And so she got into it. She's like, I will do whatever it takes to take care of my family. So she kept her day job. She borrowed some money from the Haitian American Caucus. It was one of their programs. She bought shoes. She got her daughter to sell them in the marketplace. She would be there in the morning and the afternoon and cook in the middle of the day. She did that again. She bought more shoes. She bought more shoes. She borrowed more money. And in less than 3 years, where you see her standing there now, that was land that she bought, right? So almost no women own property in Haiti, but this is hers. 6 months after this, and I still, I mean, this story is 8 years old now, right, Dean? And I still get goosebumps thinking about the pride when she took us into her house for the first time that she owns. Nobody could ever throw her out of that. She built it, she did it, and her whole family's taken care of. So it's her kids and her grandkids now have this stability that was unimaginable. And it happened, relatively speaking, like that.
Wow.
And so that's a great story. And it happens with other women in Haiti and in other places. And so it wasn't just like a flash of lightning and it happened in one place at one time. But what we found is women like Marie-Ange were willing to work harder than any of us are willing to work, right? The stakes are higher. But what she had access to as a single individual with no capital was the worst of the worst. So what ended up happening, you would donate your shoes to a thrift store, didn't get sold here. It got sold, then it went to like their sort of outlet, didn't get sold there, went to a broker, let's say in Miami, and then it got sold again into Haiti and then one more time. So there were all these steps between your closet and her. And every time somebody touched it, they took out the best stuff and raised the price. So when it gets to somebody like Marie-Ange, it's the worst product at the highest price. You and I are enough business people to know that's a terrible recipe for a financial model. So what we've done, what we figured out a little bit by luck and some hard work, is if you take all those middlemen out and it goes right from your closet to her at a price that can't be touched in the marketplace, and her income tripled. That's what happened. So our part was to be a good supply chain partner. Her part was all the hard work of showing up in the market every day and negotiating and all those things. But together, that was a really transformational experience for her. And she brought other people into it. She hired other people. I mean, all these ripples keep going.
Right.
And that still is what motivates me about Souls for Souls.
Wow. How do you find her?
Local partners, right? A knucklehead white guy from Nashville is not going to find Marie-Ange in Haiti, right? So we have a great partner in every country that we work this way. So in Honduras, we're about to start in Guatemala, Moldova, in Eastern Europe. We're experimenting in a few countries in Africa right now, Zambia, Malawi, and hopefully soon Ghana. We got to find a local partner who is always attuned to what's going on and also doing other things, right? It's always a not-for-profit partner. So they're schools, nutrition, housing, jobs, and we're one part of that. And they can vet the people. They can say, boy, this isn't going to work this way. Can we adapt? And so between our relationship with the not-for-profit partner and the not-for-profit partner and the end entrepreneur, that's a pretty powerful model for us.
Wow. And the environmental impact, I hadn't even thought about that until I was reading some of your stuff. And I was like, that is genius. I mean, you guys have had a major impact.
I mean, it's tens of millions of pounds of things we've kept out of landfills, together. And so it's really important. And the other thing that's interesting over the last few years, and COVID accelerated it, you've heard this a lot, I'm sure recently, accelerated so many things. Companies' understanding and commitment to sustainability has just gone through the roof. And so what before was kind of the fringy sort of benefit has now moved to the center for a lot of our corporate partners. And also our individual donors, they want to know what's happening with this product, and they are much more thoughtful about, I can sell it. I have all these channels to sell it now, put the money in my own pocket. And if I'm not going to do that, I want to make sure it's not going to make the planet worse and people can use it to create a better future. And so all those things are coming together now to make sustainability really sort of front and center.
Wow. And talk about your corporate partners and how that works. So you have corporations that will actually donate product to this kind of
Absolutely.
thing or sell it at a cheap price?
So right now, it's a great question, Dean, and we're sort of thinking about ways that the model might change. But up until now, it's all been donated product. So it's excess inventory, customer returns, samples, things that didn't go right at the factory, but the shoe's still perfectly good. And look, companies have lots of options with that product. Typically, they can sell it off in increasing, like discount stores might take it. There's a layer called jobbers who will buy it for pennies on the dollar and move it all over the planet, and they can donate it to us. And so in some companies, the ethos is we're going to get every penny out of the process. And so we're at the very end. And some companies are like, we think we can do better than pennies on the dollar. Let's put this to use and create millions of dollars of economic impact. And so it just
Right.
depends on the company. They have different reasons, but it is a huge driver for us on footwear and apparel. The other thing that's interesting, and a great example is the shoe store DSW. They have 500 locations around the US. They've engaged their customers, right? So not so much their inventory, but they said to they solved a customer problem. Their customers came to them and said, we'd love to buy more shoes, but we feel guilty. There's a lot in the closet. And so we'd already had a relationship with DSW, but they really reached out to their customers and said, if you bring those shoes in, we'll give you reward points in their loyalty program. And then you can shop more and you know what's happening with these shoes. We have, in the last 4 years, their customers have donated 4 million pairs of used shoes.
Oh
Right?
my gosh.
Mind blowing. So there's not just what's in my warehouse if I'm a company, it's how do I engage my employees and my customers. And when we can do all of that together, it is really, really powerful.
That is fantastic. What a great concept.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about perspective for a minute, because I think guys like you know this information, but a lot of people may not. More than 767 million people in the world live on less than $2 a day. And you talk about what a lot of them lack in money, they can make up for in resilience and resourcefulness. But just as a kind of a big picture, perspective, I think one of the greatest gifts you can have in life is perspective. Because we're sitting where we sit, and if we lack perspective, it affects our behavior and what we do. Talk about perspective from where you sit, because you're in touch with the realities on the ground in a lot of these places. And just for somebody who may be interested, share a little bit about your heart and your perspective from where you sit on poverty and what the need is.
Yeah, Dean, it's the whole game. I mean, you're exactly right. Perspective it's what we have to work. I have to work the hardest at keeping in place, right? Because it's so easy to just fall back into the lights come on, hot water comes out, I can drink it. I'm not going to get hassled by the police on the way to the bank. I can exchange money. Like all these things for me are just like, the fish in the water. I don't really notice it. And yet we talk to our partners and realize, I guess there are two big things. One is the stability that we take for granted. It pushes, when you don't have it, it pushes everything out, right? When you have to worry about threats at every turn, psychological, physical, financial, your horizon is really short. So thinking long-term, it's not because these people aren't smart. They don't understand the consequences. It's like, I can't think about 48 hours from now, because that's when my food runs out. That's when how gas I have to power the generator, whatever it is. We can't do that, Dean. We can try our best. We can be sympathetic. We don't live that. So that's another reason for our partners. Like they are the bridge who can say, I understand you, buddy, sitting in the US, because often they have some connection here and they live on the ground. And they're like, so that's super important. But the other thing that is really critical is understanding around predictability. We don't think about this much, but when we say $2 a day, it's not like $2 on Monday, $2 on Tuesday, right? It's $20 now and nothing for 10 days. Again, you and I have a hard time understanding what that like wildly unpredictable, not the very far future, right? The next few days is like,
Right.
and those two things come together to make it really hard to make good decisions about your family or your physical health. And one of the things that we see time after time when we are in partnership with people in Honduras or Zambia is they're all the immediate benefits of the house and food and art. They are super important, but what they create is an ability for people to think longer term. And that's when you invest in your family and do those things because you see the benefit of that. It's, for me, there's no substitute for going. Like we can take pictures and talk to people on the phone and Zoom. There's no substitute. That's been the hardest thing of this last 15 months is not to be with the people that we love and care about and are invested deeply into their work. And I mean, I just know in some relationships that I've had, like I've done really dumb things because that perspective is now much more sort of theoretical. And I was in Honduras in March. They'd been through 2 massive hurricanes. And yet here these guys are building thrift stores and hiring people. And there's no substitute for seeing the devastation of that storm. And yet here are these people, I mean, busting their butts to get back on their feet.
Wow.
And there's, I don't know how you get around that except by being there.
And you can't unsee that, can you? I mean, you can't unexperience that.
Absolutely not. If you can, I don't know that I want to hang out with you. Like, if that doesn't really change who you are, I don't know
Right.
that that's somebody I want in my circle.
Right. I was reading a number of articles and different things about you, and you have a fascinating background, by the way, just as a corporate executive and speaker and all the things you've done. It's fantastic. But one of the articles I was reading was talking about the magnificent power of the one. And this is a concept that I've thought about for a long time, because I think when you're trying to do big things, which clearly you are, for the average person, it can be just so overwhelming. The numbers, the darkness, kind of the gosh, 767 million people. I mean, how do I, it's almost like, how can I possibly make a difference? I mean, but then in this article, it was talking about the magnificent power of the one, that if you want to change the world, it's the person in front of you. That's where, and that perspective, speaking of perspective, that perspective is so powerful. But talk a little bit about that, because I'm just thinking about the family behind you in that picture. And
Yeah.
there's one family. The ripple effect that's happened because of what's happened in that family's life, we can't even see a lot of it.
No. Yeah, Dean, it's such an important point. And in a way, it gets trivialized, right? Because then it comes across as anecdotal, or I cherry pick the story. And so that's a risk, right? That we don't extrapolate from that one story and think that we've figured out whatever it is. At the same time, for me, it's the only way to anchor what we're doing. Like, we have some internal metrics that we use every day, but it's really a 2030 goal around economic impact. So we have this long-term, and it's kind of abstract and it's math, and it keeps us on track in a certain way. But the thing that keeps us motivated and that keeps me going is, there's a reason this picture is here every day. Like, every day I'm in the office, I see this picture of Marie-Ange and her family. And that happened, right? And I could put a picture of Jeanette and Joanice and all these other women who have similar stories. And that's, I think, the only way to communicate to other people and to myself what's really happened. Because it's super easy to get distracted in all the ways that it's hard. getting shoes into a country, the customs guy wants a little bit of money, the truck doesn't show up. I mean, all those things happen, and it's easy to get pulled into that. And that's a part of what we have to do. But the reason to do it is to remember people like Marie-Ange and to look back over now, 7 or 8 years and realize like her world is a whole different thing than it would have been otherwise. And we got to play a little part of that. And so there's a lot of gratitude that comes from real thinking about that one person and knowing that our paths crossed in a certain way. And also that she's not an anomaly. That's not the only time that happened. And so those two things
Right.
are really good guardrails.
Right. So relief and sustainability, I feel like it's choosing between your kids. You can't pick one or the other because we need them both. I mean, the truth is, especially, the way you guys are responding to natural disasters and, relief is a big deal. And yet, and not yet, and
Yeah.
over the last, 10 or 15 years, sustainability has become a major buzzword for a lot of philanthropists, foundations, donors, because people want to see a strategy that works. And I think what you're doing certainly fits that bill. But you really don't. Your model, these two things, you're not picking between relief and sustainability. You're really doing both, right?
Dean, it's a subtle point that you make, and I appreciate that because it does feel like a trade-off, right? One of the things that I think got Souls for Souls into trouble 10 years ago is it's really easy to explain relief. Like everybody gets fire, flood, you need shoes. And so we're going to get shoes to those people. That's an easy story. To say you're going to donate your used shoes and we're going to sell them to poor people in the developing world and they're going to create a business. There are people like, that's terrible. You're going to sell shoes to poor people? Like, you're not nice. And so it's easy to not tell that story and focus on the easy story. So there was a time when I first came and trying to figure it out, I was like, well, let's just stop giving stuff away for free. That's short term, doesn't help that much. Let's play the long game. And a lot of people, first and foremost, my wife, she said, if you stop giving away shoes to people in need, you will never get another penny from me. Oh, okay, I should pay attention to that sentiment. And I think we finally, just recently, Dean, really, other than natural disasters, that's a clear need to respond. But what does it mean to give a pair of shoes to a kid in Kentucky whose parents haven't worked in a year because there are no jobs? Like, what does that really mean? What are we doing? And we ask ourselves that question a lot, not in a sanctimonious way, or a glib way, but like, what are we really doing? And only recently, we've just launched this program last fall called For Every Kid. There are 1.5 million school kids in this country who experience homelessness at some point during the year. We should be outraged by that. I didn't know about that until 18 months ago. But now that we know, so like you said, you can't unsee it. Okay, if people are working on food and people are working on housing, which are the two most important things, turns out shoes are like maybe number 3. Well, if we don't do that, somebody should kick us out, right? That's why we're here. And so I think finally having a clear story in the US about why free shoes matter to kids is now super clear. And it sits alongside our microenterprise story really beautifully right now. And so I think it's taken us a while to, get that right kind of balance, but it feels like we finally slipped into the right groove. And so we just started, we're 35,000 shoes. We got to get to 1.5 million. So we have a long way to go, but it's super motivating to know we can address it. It is addressable and is a real need. Let's focus on that and keep our foot on the accelerator as much as we can to help entrepreneurs in the developing world.
That's so great. Where can people find you? Souls for Souls, is it .org or?
That's it. Soles4Souls.org is the main website. You can go on there, type in your zip code, find the closest place to drop off shoes. You can learn more about our mission. You can hear interviews with Marie-Ange and some of the other folks, for example. And on all the social media platforms, we're at Soles4Souls as well, Instagram, Facebook, etc.
Soles4Souls.org. That's SOLES and SOULS. I think people understand that, but Soles4Souls.org is the website. Buddy Teaster, congratulations. Thank you for coming on. Thanks for what you're doing.
Dean, thanks for giving us a chance to talk about it. It's a real pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you. We'll see you next time.